Well, hello, everybody. It's great to have you here today. And my name's Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, and co-founder of GSD, Get You Done Venture Studios, serial entrepreneur, loving adventure. And it was with great honor today that Per Wimmer has graciously agreed to join us. And I must say, I've seen a lot of bios in my life, Per, but I've never seen any as wide, as enriching as yours. So it's a great honor. So tell me a little bit about it. So you got an LLM, you went to Harvard, you're an astronaut, you've got, I was incredible. I saw a movie on IMBD that you did about Elon Musk, the Iron Man, and it's just such a rich environment. What drives you? What makes you pair? I mean, what drives you to always seek tandem parachuting over Everest? It's like James Bond. I mean, read that through. I'm hanging out with Selma Hayek and Elton John and Coldplay and Prince Andrew and the Prince of Monaco. And I mean, it's everybody. It's unbelievable. Prince Charles. So I don't know who you don't know. How does it work? Richard Branson, Elon Musk. So what drives you? What makes you who you are?
Well, thank you for the kind comments. I'll be blushing here quietly in the background, but I think what really is important for me is I have an attitude just of keen to learn. Deep inside my heart here is a sort of a never to be extinguished desire to keep learning, and this translates into both formal education, like you pointed out. I mean, I've got 4 master degrees. I was a bit greedy in that regard. I've got 2 high school degrees, one in Denmark, one in France, mainly to learn the language in France. So it's really been sort of the desire to learn both.
You have 4 master's degrees? I didn't see 4. I saw
okay.
You went an LLM and you went to Harvard. And what drives you? But what made you decide to get 4? I mean, for normally, this person has 1, maybe 2, but 4?
I was a bit greedy. I'm sorry, but yeah, it was. There's various reasons for it, but obviously, I started up in law, did my bachelor in law and my first master's here in Copenhagen, where I am today, and my second LLM out of London, and then decided to give it a tweak and moved into political science and studied at the European Oxbridge, if you like, College of Europe. And got my master's in political science from there. And that in turn fast-tracked me, luckily, I was a bit lucky there, into the cabinet of the vice president of the European Commission. So then I was there, and there was a time where, financial monetary union was all happening, this thing we today call the euro. My boss was responsible for that within the cabinet. I mean, it was so exciting. I mean, so to be honest, I've been lucky, but I've also always sought education, learning, with a very healthy and positive attitude, both formally through the education, which you've just gone through, but equally also informally, i.e. when talking to you right now, when talking to people in general, I always have a very positive, you may say Danish attitude where, who are you, Gary? Let's talk, let's explore, etc. And that translates into a very positive interaction with human beings, whatever culture or background they're from. So whether it's on this particular show or it's indeed living with the Indians in the Amazon jungle, which I enjoyed in
yeah, I saw the picture. I've never seen anything like it. I saw a picture with you. You had red lips. I don't know where that was, but an Indian from the Amazon. I've never seen anything like that in my life. I thought, well, if there's nothing good going to happen, I look and there's like a curtain. It was like a formal kind of setting, but I've never seen anything like that in my life. It's incredible.
Well, I'll tell you, when I was out there in the Amazon jungle, literally, I went backpacking there on my own. I mean, I literally flew into Manaus, the capital of the Amazon, missed my ferry. There's a ferry that sort of goes slowly upriver. I missed it. So what do? You, as an entrepreneur, you quickly figure out what to do. I found a guy who had a very long boat with a big engine in the back. And like you said, in the best sort of James Bond style, it said, follow that, follow that ferry, get on with it. And we jumped in, threw in the luggage, and we just raced and raced and raced. And eventually we caught up with this slow-moving ferry. And I put the backpack on and I literally climbed up the side of the ferry, which was difficult, but the boats were still moving, obviously, both of them. But eventually I make it up on top. And you wouldn't believe this, Gary. I mean, you're in the middle of the Amazon jungle, having just made it on board for the ferry I missed. You could not make this up. I make it up to the second floor. I mean, on the first floor, there were cows and cattle and all sorts of things. The second floor, there was a big mess, but people were sleeping and all sorts of things. I make it to the top floor. There were 12 absolutely gorgeous Brazilian models heading inland for a photo shoot. So I tell you, we had the most fantastic party that evening. Yeah, you couldn't make it up. So a bit of luck sometimes. Anyways, I eventually make it up to the middle of the Amazon jungle. I get off by a little town called Tefe, walk around town. It's a little village. And ask, is there anybody who knows about the Amazon jungle? And they all say, oh, you got to talk to Joaquim. Joaquim is your man. Turned out, I eventually found Joaquim, and wonderful guy as he is. And it turns out he's actually of Indian descent. I mean, his family live in the jungle. I mean, it's like, you're the perfect man. I mean, absolutely fantastic. And he's a medicine man. So he knows his ways around. He knows what to do, etc. Only one slight problem that concerned me, to be honest. I mean, I absolutely loved him for all those reasons I've just elaborated. The only thing I haven't told you yet is he was also blind.
Oh,
and he was,
I thought you were going to tell me cannibal.
No, he's not a cannibal. He was the nicest guy on earth, but he was also blind. And he ended up being our guide for the Amazon trip. So with him and a boatsman, guided by him, this blind man, I mean, it was unbelievable. He kind of feeled his way through the Amazon jungle, and we sailed and sailed and sailed and sailed. And lo and behold, we found his family. I mean, unbelievable. And such a great privilege. And then I lived there with his family. I was made in charge of fishing piranhas for dinner. That was our dinner. I mean, forget about money. Money is completely useless. Completely. You can't use, toilet paper at best. We didn't have toilet paper, so that was probably the best use of money, if you like. But otherwise, it was literally living off the forest every single day. And I became quite good at fishing for piranhas.
You were fishing for piranha? What did you use for bait for piranha? I'm really curious about that.
Well, we used other little fish actually, and hooked it on a little hook, and then we just kept looking. And the good news, if I should give you a little tip on piranha fishing, in case you ever get so inclined, the good thing about it, once you catch one, you're done, because they travel in big schools, and you can just keep pulling them up, one by one, but not many at a time, because they'll bite you, and they bite really hard. They're really sharp teeth. If they bite your finger, you'll bleed. And don't fall into the water. That's bad news. So stay in the boat, get one up at a time, and they're absolutely delicious. So I lived up pretty much the whole time.
I have to remember that.
Yes, it's a little tip.
little piranha. Now, you go from the Amazon to Mount Everest in tandem parachuting. How did that happen? How do you go from this? How do you go? Sorry about that. I was too excited. I put my hand on the floor.
Sure.
I mean, to go from that to 10, what drives that? How do you say, I've had this great experience fishing for piranha. Now I'm going to go up and I'm going to tandem parachute. How does that, and then is that a world record? I mean, you were what, 25,000 feet? It was like an amazing amount. How far up were you when you did your parachuting?
We were actually 30,000 feet. So it was actually the world's first tandem skydive over Mount Everest, full stop. It was the world's first. So it wasn't really tested. And as an adventurer, I'm an adventurer at heart, hence why I go to the Amazon, hence why I traveled the world. I've been to 84 countries on planet Earth so far. After the Amazon, I ended up skiing at the highest ski mountain in the world, where there's actually a ski lift at 5,500 meters. But so you keep pushing the boundaries, and once you've seen a lot of things, including on planet Earth. And before I was heading up to Everest, I knew I was going to space, because I'd signed up 8 years prior to that to go to space to become an astronaut. So, but then my space trip was getting delayed for technical reasons, and therefore there was a hole in my adventure calendar. And
I think I'm going to go up 30,000 feet just because I got a little time.
Wow. Exactly. That's exactly what happened. I mean, it was literally that. I was sort of thinking, what can we do? What are other sort of big things here on planet Earth? And well, the biggest thing last time I checked is Mount Everest. And I've always wanted to do something with Everest, but not just climb it, because everybody does it these days. I mean, a lot of adventures and a lot of respect for that, because it's very dangerous. But to be honest, it's quite dangerous, and you end up standing in a line in many times, and especially in more recent times, it's quite dangerous. So I wanted to do a first. That's what I do. I want to do first, break records. You know, that's what I do.
You figure you're going to go up 30,000 feet. Nobody's ever done it before. And parachute down. What was it like when you were up that high and you were coming down? How did it feel?
Well, first and foremost, before we even got to that point, there was a lot of logistical challenges. It's not something you just do. It was quite hard, actually. For starters, we did some training over Mont Blanc in Switzerland, which is the highest mountain in Europe. That was our training ground, if you like. We eventually found 2 Swiss pilots who were crazy enough to be up for the idea. So we said, all right, don't come along. And then the only problem was we had to then fly this little Pilatus Porter plane from Switzerland to Nepal, to Kathmandu. It took us 5 days. It took 5 days to get over there. Anyways, we had to get permits from 7 different ministries in Nepal, which, if you know bureaucracy, I mean, that's big time bureaucracy. That's not easy at all. And then when our pilots finally came there, having flown for 20 odd years, then they were forced to sit down and take a special Nepalese flight test to fly in the Himalayas. Otherwise, they were not allowed to be let loose up there. And that was really a problem for us, because the clock was ticking, and the weather got worse and worse. So we were just sitting there, and it was challenging. Also in the group, there was a lot of pressure in the group and that sort of things. But eventually, we made it up there, and lo and behold, on October 6, 2008, the plane took off. And actually, when the plane takes off, it always reminds me that you take a decision and you stick with it, because we couldn't have landed again on the same spot with us on board once we had left. It would be impossible, or too risky, because of the weight. Anyway, this poor plane, which, by the way, wasn't approved to fly in the altitude that we were targeting. But that's a smart side thing. But we hoped it would. We thought it would. Fingers crossed.
Now you're going to parachute out.
Yeah, so fingers crossed. I mean, we figure we'll always get down anyway. So, but this poor little plane was working much harder than the flight certificate said. But eventually, it makes it up to altitude, which actually was close to 30,000 feet, or about 9,000 meters and a bit. Everest is 8.8 kilometers high, roughly. So we made it up to the top of Everest, and a little bit on the side for safety purposes, because the last thing you want to do is get stuck right on the top, because we'll never make it down. We didn't have oxygen big bottles with us. We had small bottles just to make it down through. Because don't forget, at this altitude, you're up there where the jet streams are. I mean, this is where the jet streams are. This is where you would, when you fly London to New York, that's where you are. It is pretty chilly. It was minus 55 degrees centigrade.
Wow.
Not sure what that is in Fahrenheit, but it was cold. It was very cold. So when you put up your neck, so the door opens and the pilot says, 3, 2, 1, go. And then that's it, out of the door.
And then when you looked out, did you see, was the Earth round at that altitude? What did the Earth look like from that altitude? How did it?
Yeah, so I wouldn't, at that altitude, first of all, I was very focused on my procedures, so I didn't see the curvature of the Earth. I've seen that separately, if I can just put in a little parenthesis here. Mm-hmm. I can confirm the Earth is round, because I have seen it, but that was on a different flight. I once flew a MiG-25 fighter jet, Russian fighter jet, from Moscow to Siberia and back at 3 times the speed of sound. And at that point, I was up at 80,000 feet.
80,000 feet? Wow.
80,000 feet or 27 kilometers of altitude, so higher than the Concorde,
Hmm.
literally on the edge of space. I mean, you can't go any higher simply because there's no more air. You know, a jet engine works that it sucks in the air and it spits it out again. And if there's no air to be sucked in and spit out, then obviously you can't get higher. So
Hmm.
that is about the maximum altitude. And there at that altitude, I saw the blackness of the universe, the beautiful, beautiful curvature of the Earth, the white clouds, and way below us where we were,
Hmm.
a little bit of blue as well, and then obviously the beautiful planet Earth. So that at that level, you definitely see the curvature of the Earth, and I certainly saw that when I was flying the MiGs.
And what made you decide to do a MiG at 80,000 feet to Siberia? I mean, that's another. Was it just like one day you said, "Oh, I happen to be in Moscow, you know, I'm going to have a little fun," or what was the deal? What made you decide to say, "I'm going to do this"? And how do you convince somebody to do that? Is it like normal, or was it just another adrenaline experience?
No, first of all, you don't just show up at the gate. I mean, this is heavily guarded and that sort of thing. I mean, this is military territory.
Mhm.
But no, this was in the early days where I literally just signed up for my first ticket to space. So I was an excited astronaut, and I was heading to Russia to conduct my first part of my space training, which for one included flying MiGs and other fighter jets in Russia. Very exciting in its own right. It included centrifuge training at Star City, as it famous for Yuri Gagarin and all the other cosmonauts. And in fact, when we were doing our thing, the other Russian cosmonauts were doing their thing. I mean, we were training side by side. It was fabulous. Really, really exciting stuff. And then the final thing we also did, for completeness sake, was I was flying Ilyushin 76, which is a very big cargo plane. It's one of the biggest cargo planes in the world that would then take you up to an altitude of about 16 kilometers. And then you nosedive down for 30, 40 seconds at a time, during which time you become like a bird. You're floating around in complete weightlessness, and you play around with each other. You play volleyball. You play Superman like this. You know, you fly through. It's terribly exciting, but it's all part of my space training. And it was my first training I was doing there back then. And I was actually en route to Baikonur, Kazakhstan. So there was sort of a pit stop before heading down to Kazakhstan. Why go to Baikonur? Well, because there was a very, very historic moment in Kazakhstan. So we took a private jet with some people from the Duma down to Baikonur because Denis Tito, the very first American private astronaut, was due to launch. And I was right there on the launch pad, literally 10 minutes before Dennis took off and made history, became the first private astronaut, and made it all the way up to the ISS on a Soyuz rocket.
Well, that's incredible. So you go through that. Now tell me about, I read something about the land speed. You were working on some kind of land speed record. Where's that come from?
Well, when you're an adventurer, people sometimes reach out to you when they have a good idea. And I was in Florida on a space conference actually, and talking a lot of space rockets and that sort of things. And there was one sort of cocktail one evening where I got to talk to a really nice guy, and he was. And I was asking, so what else are you involved in? What else do you do? Well, I mean, we move fast in a different way, not on rockets, but in a different way. He said, I said, oh, how was that? I was like, I'm very intrigued. And one thing took the next, and I think about a year later, I was in the cockpit of an F-104 starfighter, i.e., fighter jet,
Yeah.
that had been refitted, where the wings have been clipped off, refitted with a new GE dash engine that can do Mach 2 in the back. And I was sitting there doing test trials up and down Black Rock deserts in Nevada, running pretty fast. That's what can happen on a good cocktail.
Have you ever done with all this stuff? Have you ever said, this is just something I shouldn't be into? Have you ever gotten a seat of one of these things and just for a second said to yourself, What am I doing today?
I tell you, there's never a boring day. There's never a boring day. Whatever I do, whatever I do. And I think also, on a slightly more serious note, I mean, if you have that attitude, that positive attitude, and you literally have fun, whatever you do, you know what? You attract a lot of positive energy, a lot of resources, and people find it interesting, and you end up having a laugh. It's really fantastic. In fact, more broadly, if you allow me, I have 7 fundamental values that sort of transcends everything I do, both on the adventure side and the business side and that sort of thing. And just very briefly, these are not rocket science values, but those are really key elements to achieving performance or exciting things, etc. And just very briefly, they are: number 1, always think out of the box, always be open for new idea, new inspiration. That could happen, that cocktail down in Florida, or it could happen right now. I mean, who knows? Just always have the antennas out. You never know what might show up. That might be one of your viewers here, or if your audience on has a new crazy idea. So we might have to come back and do a show. Exactly. Number 2, always follow your heart and follow your passion and have fun doing it, because passion can really move mountains. You know, if you have an idea and you're passionate about it, even your worst enemies become your best friends, because eventually they know you're not going to give up. You're going to keep going, and they'll join. If you can't beat them, join them. And that's the attitude. So passion is very important. Number 3, focus and execution. So once you've figured out what it is you want to do, you want to skydive Everest, or you want to live in the Amazon jungle, or you want to set the world land speed record, or you want to become an astronaut, whatever your goals are, collect stamps. I mean, whatever it might be, focus on it and execute. Once you've taken the decision, there's no turning back. That is what you are doing. Never give up, never give up. Persistency. Number 4, use teams. 1 + 1 + 1 = 5. Why? Because synergies are created within teams. So it goes without saying, but certainly as an astronaut, you know, we need people who can train you. We need doctors. We need people with access to these bases where we're training. We need capital. We need all sorts of things. We need astronauts who want to fly and that sort of thing. So that's very important. So good teamwork. Number 5. Always also look at the risk reward. What is the total risk of what can happen, and if things go wrong? Ultimately, going to space gives an enormous upside, which justifies it, but there is a risk, and you gotta be mindful. You gotta be mindful about that, and that's very important. And then lastly, and the absolutely most important value of them all, that is, whatever you do, always inspire, always give back. Always try to inspire others to do great things. And we do it when we team up with charities, and that's the way we sort of give back, and I give presentations about the stuff I do. But that's very important. If you share it, inspire others, then other good things will come out of it. And even if you're one day you wake up and suddenly the boomerang comes back when you least expect it, and something very positive happens, that's amazing. So those are the values. They're all on wimmerspace.com. You can see it there in case you didn't write them down, but that's where they are. So
I mean, it's great. I did X a few years ago. Passion, optimism, and visualization. I know my first startup at 21 years old. I came out of graduate school as a clinical psychologist, as a master's degree. And I decided to design houses. I'd never been an architect in my life. But I said, I'm going to build houses. And it was funny how the world started to line up. My martial arts instructor said, I'm a contractor and I don't have any work. So here I was at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning taking jujitsu classes. And I said, well, geez, this is pretty simple. I said, it's interesting. I said, what if I designed a house? Could you build it? Well, I ended up building about $9 million worth of houses many years ago, my first startup. And it couldn't be done. I put 87,000 bricks, 14-foot ceilings in basements with maids' quarters and all that. But you understand through your life, that is, I remember with my first martial arts class at 15 years old, that the master came up to me and he said, I want you to break through these boards. Well, boards aren't that hard. But then he held a piece of cinder block up for my brown belt test. And he said, He said, hold it with one hand. It's a 2-inch cap. I want you to break it. And this is not easy. He said, you have to have strong mind and you have to think about being on the other side. That's what life's all about. And I remember when I smashed through it, and I'm sure 15 years old, I understood you could do anything that you want if you believe in your dreams and you focus on being on the other side. So, and you're right, the world lines up for you. If you're passionate and you've got positive energy, you attract the positive energy, that kind of magnetism. So it's incredible. I love it. I love it. I love your story. Okay, so let's go down through. So when I was looking up, we're reading through your bio, the movies, this Elon Musk, we talked pre-show about Elon Musk. Tell me, how did you come up now? Now you got the movie thing going. How did that come about?
Well, again, that's I've done. If we roll back the time, so about 15 years ago or something like that, perhaps even longer, actually, 16, 17 years ago. I was just doing my own little adventures, because I thought it was fun, the Amazon and that sort of thing. I just did it because that's what I do, and I, signed up to become an astronaut and started the training. By that time, I was working for Goldman Sachs in London, and I was just popping away for the weekend, extended weekend, doing my space training, come back and, how was the weekend? It was good. How was yours? Nothing. But one day, one of the traders discovered on Reuters, the news system, that there was a story saying Per Wimmer is going into space, and then suddenly, boom, the whole thing exploded. He sent around to 22,000 staff at Goldman's at that time. And then the story was out. And then suddenly a lot of the media started calling. I was like, this is very exciting. And at that point, I had to sort of make a decision. Do I either keep it private like I've done so far, or do I give up and just get involved and then use that attention into something positive, like supporting my charities or the charities I've been supporting, that sort of things. And I decided for the latter because I realized that there was going to be an avalanche of things coming out of this. And then over the past, certainly 15 years, I've done lots and lots of interviews on BBC, Sky, and all sorts of news channels and outlets and magazines and God knows what. I mean, it's a regular thing. I mean, even nowadays, it goes on and on. And as part of that, my name travels a little bit in the media world. And then there's always somebody who's got a new idea and phones up and say, what do you think? We know so-and-so, and we would like to do this and that. Would you be up for that? And that's exactly what happened to the Elon Musk documentary. I got a phone call, and I'm happy to share my views on it. I mean, I think Elon is an amazing visionary of this 21st century. He's a very rare breed, and I'm just lucky enough to have gotten to know him before he became a rock star.
Yeah, it's amazing. So you did that, but it wasn't one movie. There's a couple of them out there that you've done, so it's not one. And you just decided to do them and just do them passionately, or how did it come about?
I mean, we had before I was heading down to Nepal to skydive Everest, for instance. We thought that was a pretty cool adventure. We thought it was, it's a world record. It was the world's first, at least. And therefore, we contacted a couple of the broadcasters and said, well, you guys, if you want to come along and do a little documentary about it, feel free. But the problem we found was there's a lot of bureaucracy in big organizations. They couldn't move as fast as we could. And I thought, that's a real shame, because I'm not going to do that thing again. So I just decided at one point, listen, let's stop these conversations with the big broadcasters. I'll just set up my own production team. I'll hire the camera people. I'll hire the cinematographer. I'll hire an expert in satellite communications, so we know what we're doing. I put the whole team together within less than a month.
Wow.
And lo and behold, we had a great team together and all got the flights booked. And these guys just worked their butts off once we were down there. They were doing all the things we were doing. So when we were walking all day, getting acclimatized to the high altitude, they did the same thing, and they were filming. And then in the evening, Kenneth in particular, he was editing and broadcasting live from there back to Europe. So at one point, this is a sort of claim to fame for Kenneth. At one point, he had the highest TV broadcasting station in the world from close to Everest, which was fantastic for him. And then when he came back, and Kenneth, he was nobody in the film business. He's a Danish guy. Nobody had ever heard about him. I took a bet on him. He was in early 20s. He was a young kid. But he had that passion, and I loved his passion. I could see it in his eyes. So I said, oh, let's give him a chance. I think he's a good bet. And it turned out to be, because he worked so hard, you couldn't believe it. And when he came home, or back when it all was done, he spent 6 months in a dark cellar up in Aarhus in Denmark, editing this thing, and produced this beautiful, beautiful documentary, which was later nominated to the Danish Film Festival Awards. And it won. It was his first documentary ever. He won that year. I mean, it was just, you couldn't make it up. And the Danish BBC equivalent, of course, when they saw what he had produced, like, oh, we love this. This is great. This is a no-brainer. Well, we told you so earlier, but anyway, if you want to buy it, here's the price. And they did. So it was a great story for Kenneth here. He did amazingly well. And for me as an entrepreneur, I was just the one sort of initiating it as a sidekick to the main adventure itself. So that's how I got into that part of the business as well.
That's amazing. So, in terms of space, what's your end goal? Where do you want to go? Do you want to go to Mars, or what do you want to do as an astronaut? Where do you want to go with it? How far out?
Well, I'm a founding astronaut with Virgin Galactic. So I will be one of the very first to fly on Virgin Galactic when the final tests are done. And the good news is here that in spite of Corona and stuff, we have actually been progressing very, very nicely with the test flights. And we are now in the final phases of the test program. We have gone into what's called power test flight, which is the ultimate final part of it, as it were. So soon, watch that space. We will get ready to fly, which is going to be very, very exciting. So that's my first goal. It is to become an astronaut. There's less than 600 people on planet Earth that has ever been into space. I need to get my wings here. You see there's an empty space here for my astronaut wings. I need to get those, and that's very much my first goal. Later after that, I would love to go back up again, no doubt, and go further and longer and that sort of thing. But space is hard. It costs an awful lot of money. It takes an awful lot of time, and even thinking going into space and then even say go to the moon, for instance. I mean, the moon is far away, we would think, but it's actually next door in spatial terms. And Mars. I mean, to get to Mars, it's at least a sort of 6 months one way trip and 6 months back, if not more. So it's by no means an easy feat. So that's the problem about space. But I certainly want to go up more and keep exploring that, as well as also doing other adventures. As a human race, we have traveled in about 11,000 meters since ever. Why 11,000 meters? 10,000 meters up when we fly New York to London, and about 1,000 meters down for most submarines. That's it. If you look at where humans are at any point in time, that's usually within that. I want to go further out. That's why I'm going to space, and eventually I'll also want to go further down. I've had a couple of attempts on Titanic, 2 attempts so far, in fact. Unsuccessful so far, but I'm not giving up. So watch that space.
Titanic, how far down did you get?
So we didn't get to go. For the first time we tried was in 2012. That was the centennial. There we had we're about 7 weeks from departure, so everything was all lined up and stuff. We had rented Russian equipment, the academic Keldysh ship, and the 2 submersibles, Mir 1, Mir 2, that was sort of ready to go. At that point, there was only 6 submersibles in the whole world that could go down that deep. Titanic sits at about 3.8 kilometers down. So there's only 6 available. And the 4 of them we couldn't get our hands on because they sit with governments who don't want to talk to you or don't want to rent it out, as it were. So it was only the 2 Russians that were the only game in town. But sadly, 7 weeks before we were supposed to go, politics went in and it went all the way to the top, and it was just impossible. And they said, oh, no, you have to put this out for general licitation. And obviously we couldn't do that process in 7 weeks. So we didn't get to go. We had booked flight tickets. Everything was all set. And the second attempt was in 2019 in the summer, where we tried with an American company, but they ran into trouble up in Canada. Also some regulatory stuff, I understand. So they didn't get to steam out neither. But I will make it, rest assured, and hopefully third time lucky. I'll get to go deep down. I certainly want to see the Titanic in my lifetime.
Your goal is to go to the
Yeah.
Wow. And what else? What other kind of things? What intrigues you now? What other kind of boundaries do you want to break, and what type of things do you want to see? So space, underwater, what else? What else is interesting for you?
Well, I've been to 84 countries on Earth, but interestingly enough, I've actually never visited the poles. So either Antarctica or the North Pole could certainly be good destinations. I just need to find the right angle. I mean, so many people have done so many great things with the poles, so it's very difficult to find the right sort of unique angle or unique record or something. I mean, unless you walk backwards to the North Pole or something silly like that, it's very difficult. So it's on the drawing board, so to speak. Last April, I was due to go up to Svalbard and have a photo session with the polar bears, but then COVID came and lockdown came. And another thing that was also in the making was I was due to fly in on a jet and land on a U.S. carrier. I was granted status to do that, and that was something I was very excited about. But COVID again prevented it because COVID broke out even on the ship, so we couldn't do it. But I'm hoping that in the future we'll get to do that. And then I've always had a little desire to fly jetpacks and to learn how to fly jetpacks, and so that certainly is also on the to-do list. So watch that space.
You haven't been out in LA recently, have you?
Most lately, the commute is from the bedroom to the living room and back again.
It's amazing. So let's talk about business. So, so the Wimmer family office, your investments. I mean, what's interesting for you, and what would be interesting in terms of my audience around the world? We have investors from all over the world that are looking at opportunities. What can you tell them about that?
Sure. I mean, I've got different. I've got 4 different companies I'm involved in. I've got first of all, I've got a Wimmer family office where we do some general wealth management strategies. We allocate out to funds, and we have a sort of relatively conservative, relatively liquid investment strategy that we're deploying. And at the moment, we're in the process of increasing the risk. We do think that it's now time to crank up a bit again on the risk side. So we are adding risk to the portfolio at the moment. Secondly, I have a hedge fund, a quant-based hedge fund, so-called CTA or trend follower, where we do some very fancy quant analysis of market movements, primarily expressed through managed futures, FX commodity futures and such like, where we spot patterns in the market and we will go long and short these various markets. Thirdly, I have a merchant bank as well, where we do large-scale financing of projects, primarily at the moment real estate development projects, relatively large size, typically $150, $200 million plus equity and debt. We structure it, we put it all together. And finally, I have actually during last year, during COVID times, I took a majority stake in a shopping outlet mall in Italy, close to Pisa, which is a real estate development project. So an opportunity came along, and it was funny. It was a funny story, actually, how it came along. I'll tell you this because it is worth explaining. I was down in Monaco at a sustainability conference, and I was speaking there, and we had a fabulous conference, really interesting speakers from all over the place and all sorts of walks of life. My sort of reason for being there is I've written a book about sustainability and about green energy and the future of green energy. It's called The Green Bubble. And having done all that, then in the evening we had a beautiful gala evening. And I had a pre-dinner cocktail with Prince Albert and 8 other people. So we had a good chat about that. There was also going to be a revelation of a new sports car that evening. And then we had a fabulous evening, and we were really blessed with an amazing performance by one of the 3 tenors who was speaking down there, Placido Domingo, who sung, I mean, fabulously, absolutely fabulously. It was a real treat. But then when the evening was over, I decided not to drive to the sporting where this event took place because I like walking. And then I was then with the lady who has been sat at my table, and we thought, let's go and have a drink somewhere else. And she had high heels on, so obviously we couldn't walk. And then I spotted a taxi, and I quickly ran and grabbed it. And then this Italian guy comes running along. No, it's my taxi. It's my taxi. I booked it, you know. And I said, listen, my friend, I'm so sorry, but listen, I'll pay for the taxi. We can share it. Tell me where you're going, and we can be dropped off later. But that was fine. And then we got to talk. And what do you do? And it turned out that he was involved in this developing this outlet mall in Italy. And I said, well, we finance such things. And so this kind of initial hostile thing became a friendship once we were in the taxi together, and eventually became a deal. I mean, I bought a 51% stake in the company, and now we're partners. I mean, you couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it up.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, you seem that, you will that stuff into existence. It just doesn't happen that you're down in Amazon and all these different locations and meeting these folks and these good things come out of it. You will it into existence. It's that positive energy. So it's incredible. We're coming to the top of the hour, Per. And for the viewers, what would you say is one thing that you need to have in your life in order to be successful, in order to have a full life? What is that from your perspective? I know you mentioned several things, and I read about them in your bio. But what would you say is one thing that we could leave the audience with today?
The one thing I would absolutely highly recommend to you is think about what's in here, what is truly in your heart. Life is short, our time is limited. What is in your heart? What really gets you out of bed? And make sure you live out your dreams. Think big, think out of the box, and once you figure out what is out of that box, pull it down. Focus on what your heart tells you. Have fun with it. Stop talking about it. Execute, get on with it. Control the time around it. We have limited resources in terms of time. Money can come and go, but time is limited. Work with people you like so that 1 + 1 + 1 becomes 5 and you create synergies. Control your risk. Don't take bigger risk than you're comfortable with, but at the same time, you got to risk a little to gain a little. And most importantly, make sure whatever you do to give back, to inspire others and have fun doing so. And then, my friend, I guarantee you have the recipe for a happy life thereafter. Try it out. Good luck. See you in space.
Thanks, Per. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining me today. And thank you, audience. We'll be here again next week and look forward to seeing you. Thanks.